Hey guys, it's Tim coming at you with a brand new episode of The Spotlight, the show where I pose an interesting question or just a general interesting idea and then have you guys take from there in the comments. Comic book events have definitely been a staple of the industry for a long time. And while you can track down large-scale crossovers or specific events prior to this in either Marvel or DC's history, really these took off starting with Secret Wars and Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1984 and 1985 respectively. And due to the success of those events, Marvel and DC basically started cranking out a new big summer crossover every year pretty much since then. And as they've seen more and more success financially from all of these different crossover events, they have more and more events happening each year, to the point that we're reaching or have reached the point where we're at an oversaturation of comic book events. But outside of the basic background history I just gave, what led us to this point, and will we be leaving it anytime soon? Well, of course, there's the obvious reason why this takes place, because comic book events, despite people complaining about the amount that we have nowadays, still do financially well. Usually, any major event that Marvel and DC is pushing at any given time will make it into the top 10 for monthly sales. If you need proof of this, just look at the monthly sales from last month in July, and you'll see that Civil War II issues 3 and 4 hold 2 of the top 10 spots, while the rest are held by DC Rebirth issues. But if there are so many of these events, why do they still sell well? Well, one of the reasons is the classic one, which is why books like Justice League usually sell well, and it's because you get more heroes for the amount of money that you're spending. But another reason why these events tend to do so well is because comic book events, especially since the 2000s started, tend to have larger outreaching consequences, or at the very least present themselves as having them. So people will read these events in order to see what direction the books that they want to read are going to be going in once they start up again. And you can especially see these things with things like Marvel, where a lot of their past events like Avengers vs. X-Men and Secret Wars have led to large-scale book relaunches back at number 1. And DC, while typically having less events than Marvel does and not restarting at number 1 as often, tends to compensate for this by, in the last 5 years, having basically had large-scale rebrandings and redirecting of their entire universe. But are these kind of relaunches sustainable? Well, arguably, these relaunches and the events themselves are more sustainable than continuing an ongoing series at this point. Like I said before, last month the top-selling books were all Civil War II and DC Rebirth stuff. The first several issues of a book and any comic book event tends to sell better than any later issue of a book, which typically drops off around the time you hit the double digits or even get past issue 5. And that's why Marvel tends to do all of these events and relaunch their books immediately afterwards, because they know the sales numbers will justify the action. And it's the reason why DC Rebirth is doing so well now. Because regardless of what you think of the quality of the books coming out at the moment, it will drop off over time. I mean, up until DC Rebirth came out, Marvel was killing DC in the sales. If you look at the numbers for April and May before Rebirth started, and just when Rebirth was starting, Marvel held pretty much most of the top 10 spots in terms of sales, aside from something Batman related. But then there was a huge shift in the numbers once DC Rebirth got up and running. And one of the reasons for this was because DC didn't have any major events going on at the time outside of the release of Dark Knight Master Race, and because Marvel was releasing more number 1 issues at the time, whereas DC had been continuing on pretty much from where they had been when they started back in 2011, with a few additional series that they've added on over time. And while it is annoying to continuously get all these events to the point that they no longer feel special, and that you have to keep restarting your book back at number 1, the comic book industry needs the money in order to survive, and this is where the money is right now. Is there a chance that this could change? Maybe, but I don't see it changing anytime soon. But those are just my thoughts on the oversaturation of comic book events and relaunches, but what do you guys think about it? Well, as always, let us know in the comments. If you like what you've seen here and you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe. We have a Patreon account you can donate to if you feel so inclined. And until next time, this has been Tim from the Hybrid Network, signing out.